Perhaps you got lucky in your pool and you just want to see what is the tier list rating of one of them, or maybe you're close to your 300 standard pools and you want to decide which is actually best for your account. Now let's jump in with our first character on the list. We have Bronya. In Honkai Star Rail, Bronya is more of like a buffer, supportive kind of character for the team. If I were to give an analogy for each and every one of these characters, I would say that Bronya really is like a Tesla Model X. A Tesla Model X can fit many characters and carry your entire team as a backbone support for the rest of them, and it's definitely a good investment, so to speak, for the future as well, since she is more of a support and supports don't really get power crept that much in turn-based games. Definitely a solid character because her skill pushes up characters. Pushing means that they are allowed to act much quicker and also increases their attack as well as crit damage, and she scales off. Her buffing also scales off crit damage as well. Overall, she's really great to buff characters that are very slow, for example Hook or Clara in this case, or even characters who want to have even more damage to be able to capitalize on one-shotting enemies to get more buffs, like for example Sealy, which we'll talk about in our limited 5-star tier list video later on. I do think that Bronya is a very solid investment out of the 7 and probably one of my top picks if I were to choose out of the 7. If you like her design, you want a character that scales into the late game in terms of investment value, I do think Bronya is definitely a solid pick for you. Now let's talk about Clara. On first glance, this character may seem like she's a bit of all over the place in terms of doing some damage, a little bit of tanking. So what exactly and how do you exactly build her? In my opinion, the best analogy to describe Clara is really like a Batmobile. She is a character that can do both offense and defense, and my personal take is that players should build her more on the offensive side, scaling more into her attack stat scaling. Because as we will talk about, she has many good strengths, and having high attack and HP stats is definitely one of them. She draws aggro, she has counter-attacking mechanics to deal AoE damage to the rest of the enemy teams, has also damage reduction in the kit, and not to mention, she distracts the enemies towards herself. This makes her very versatile and being able to fit into many situations and team. You can basically run Clara in a single team and mix off any other character here and there, and she will still be very relevant in most team comps. Her biggest downside, in my opinion, is that she's very slow. She's possibly one of the slowest characters in the game. If my memory doesn't fail me, she has 90 speed, which is one of the lowest, 100 being like the base speed, and the faster characters move at like 115 for Sealy. So 90 speed for Clara is actually pretty slow. Of course, if you build her for full attack and you're just focusing on her counter-attack mechanic, she actually deals a lot of AoE damage outside of her turn as well. She also works very well with two very strong supports, for example the new Tingyun in CBT3, as well as we all know from our 4-star support video that Asta is an extremely strong unit already since CBT2 and still is till today. Overall, I think that Clara's versatility and ability to fit into most teams while being able to do tons of damage and also having a very good stat line makes me rate her a high S tier. Highly recommended for most players, very versatile indeed and can fit into most team comps. The shining thing about her and the thing that makes her stand out is her ability to attack outside of her turn, which means that she can bypass a lot of the speed requirement as well. And now that we've talked a bit about a Batmobile tank kind of characters, let's talk about a genuine tank in terms of Gepard. Now Gepard is an ice tanky unit in terms of sustaining for the rest of the team, and my analogy for Gepard really would be like a Toyota Altis. Very reliable character, a Japanese car that doesn't really break down and can be counted upon, especially when you're in need of a transportation in this case. So his benefits, or what makes him stand out, is really he has an emergency button in his ultimate. When you press the ultimate, he basically protects the entire team with a shield that scales off of his stats. And what makes emergency button in terms of shielding better than, for example, Natasha or Bailu's healing is really the effective HP increase. Because when you apply a shield, let's say your character only has 500 HP, you add a shield that is another 500, you basically give the character able to survive a one shot of up to 1000 HP. Whereas healing, you will have a cap based on your max HP, and if you can't pass that cap, all you have is just a 500 HP stat. And that's what makes tanks in this game, or characters with emergency button shielding, quite more effective than healing, especially against harder content where the boss could one shot you. Other great things about him is he also revives once per battle if he faints in battle, and he also has an inbuilt drawing of aggro. Overall, he works really well to protect squishy characters that don't want to take damage. For example, the new character Yanqing, or even a character who wants to be at low life and doesn't like being healed, with his Arlan. I'm gonna rank him an A, a middle of a park A. He's not a bad character by any means, but perhaps not many people might need his additional shielding and sustain that he provides. If you are one of the speedrunners in the early parts of the game where you are running as fast as you can into the game and trying to clear hard content that normally players can't, you will find that Gepard offers tremendous value for your account because he helps you conquer content that you should otherwise not have been able to clear without a proper sustain unit. But for the most part, for majority of players who are not pushing their boundaries and tackling battles they can't or not supposed to be fighting at the current resource level, Gepard is going to be feeling rather mid of the park, especially if you have Fire MC in your team already. And now let's do another very popular female character, which is Himiko. I'm sweating a bit here because my rating on this character is going to be a little bit more critical than others because she is an AoE DPS, and AoE DPSs generally have a lot of competition. Most DPSs generally have more competition than the support counterparts. And my analogy for Himiko in general is definitely a Mercedes in diamonds, sparkles, or whatever you like to call it. It's not really necessary to have a Mercedes in diamonds, but it really makes the players feel very nice and is going to be a bit of a luxury to have for most players as well. And you guys can kind of guess how I'm going with this, but let's dive in a little bit more into why I think so. Firstly, she has a very strong attack stat, probably one of the best attack stats in the game and really good multipliers on all of her abilities. And some of you might be looking and thinking like Clara is really strong as well as Herta is really strong because of their off-turn ability to act outside of their turn order. But one thing to note is that Himiko's conditional follow-up, or Himiko's follow-up is very conditional because it requires you to break enemies, whereas Herta and other characters like Clara are much more easier to continuously execute their follow-up ability, and that is something that not many people might be considering as well, since you do need to build up that charges in order for her to follow up attack outside of a turn. And in turn-based games, compared to games like Genshin Impact, which is much more open world and there are much more permutations and combinations to form team comps, in turn-based games generally power creep is much more significant, and AoE DPSs as well as single target DPSs usually face the highest competition in terms of power creep. And not only that she's an AoE DPS that is an issue, she's also of fire element, which is also another very popular element, and strong alternatives already exist for her. For example, you have Esta as well as Fire MC. Although they are both not pure attackers and they are more classified as like a support, a sustain kind of unit, they offer very good fire break damage. And if you are just looking to chip down that weakness break, these two offer tremendous amount of fire break when you can have another element. For example, if you want to run a Sealy or maybe another AoE attacker like maybe Kafka in terms of lightning element, you get both the ability of diversifying your element attacking, also you get that strong fire damage as well. Overall, because of these reasons, I do like this character's design a lot, and I think that many people will like her as well in their team. She works very strong in the early game, but overall, if I want to think from it from a very big picture point of view, I do think that she will be a B rating in my opinion. Not very recommended for most players planning to play the game for a long time, but hey, if you're a whale and you're just playing the game for fun, you can always get a Mercedes in diamonds if it makes you feel good. I'm not trying to tell you that don't buy a Mercedes in diamonds. I'm just saying compared to the other cars, maybe this might not be the one that you're looking for in terms of, depends on what kind of mentality that you have playing Honkai Star Rail, of course. Let's jump in with, well, another popular character in Honkai Star Rail as well. He's a debuffer in terms of speed downing enemies, and if I were to give an analogy for this character, he really is like a vintage car. He provides one of the rarest speed down abilities, which is in an AoE nature. He's the only form of AoE speed down as of CBT3, and he also is of the rare element of Illusionary. Alongside the other alternative is Lota, who's also a 5-star character, and Lota is a limited 5-star character. Well, it's definitely a late game unit. You won't really feel he's destroying all enemies in the early game, as you don't really need that additional speed down stat. You will rather defeat the enemy very quickly in terms of another burst unit. But as we get on with the higher content, as more bosses and higher difficulty enemies come up, especially in the Memory of Chaos, you definitely will find that this speed down makes a pretty big difference, especially when you're trying to control difficult fights. And a lot of you might be wondering, but there are already so many other debuffing characters and some of them already have speed down. For example, the 3 units that we see on screen here, Pella, Silverwolf and Danheng. Pella is really more of a defense down, attack down kind of unit. Silverwolf and Danheng both have speed down in their kit. But Silver Wolves is based on RNG because it's not a guaranteed that she's going to land the bug that has that speed down element, and it's also only single target. Whereas Dan Heng's speed down, although it's guaranteed, but it's also only single target, whereas Welt really is an AoE speed down, allowing him to be a very good controller, especially when there's 2 or 3 very big enemy monsters that you want to apply a reliable speed down on. I do think that he's a very solid investment character. I'll rate him A+, simply because if you get him early on in the game, you probably won't feel his tremendous impact, but the longer you play the game, combined to the fact that he's a very solid investment where supports don't really get power crept very often and of being a rare element, I do think that most players who are thinking in terms of playing the game for a long run, or even like the character, will find that this is a very solid vintage card to own and have as well. And now let's get on with some new characters in CBT3. I waited a while before making this tier list video. I know a lot of you were asking me to make in the past when you saw my other 4-star videos, but I really wanted to see and finalize more information before making this video. And now we have 2 new characters to add to this list, so hopefully the wait was worth it as well. So Bailu is a sustain unit, adding to a very limited pool of sustain characters. I think truly there are only 2 real healers in the game. Of course, some other characters has a little bit of sustain here and there, but Natasha as well as Luocha are the 2 only healers, and Bailu, being a standard healer, helps widen the pool in terms of now we have 1 4-star, 1 5-star limited, and 1 5-star non-limited character that allows sustain. And because we need 2 characters to go into the 2 teams rather to go into Memory of Chaos, having more healers definitely widens our team comp rotations or team comp positions much better. I will really reckon this character to be like a rescue helicopter, a very expensive character if you really want to utilize, because you have to use your free pool or free choice for a healer, but nonetheless, if you really need a character that heals, this is a very good emergency option for most teams, and you'll find that you will breeze through a lot of content with a double healer, Natasha in one side and Bailu in the other side for the Memory of Chaos as well, at least for the early game. What makes this character interesting or good is that the kit revolves around damage reduction once you have the Invigoration passive that they will apply once they cast their abilities, and also increases the max HP of characters if they are at full health. We talked a bit about max HP, effective HP in a little bit for a part of why max HP is good, but I'll just summarize real quick for those of you who just skip to this section maybe. And effective HP is better because if you are taking damage, for example 1000 damage, and your HP is only 500, you will, no matter how much healing you get, you will still get one-shotted. But if you have an ability that gives you more HP or increases your max HP, effective HP so to speak, then you might be able to survive a more difficult one-shot situation, which makes it very beneficial for very squishy characters. Character also gives 1 revive, and with strong Eidolons at the Eidolon 6 also gives an additional revive once per battle, which is very massive. This character scales very well with Eidolons, and that is also why I call it a rescue helicopter. A very expensive but very strong, and with Eidolons can even become a bit of a buffer as well. The other options for healing currently are Luocha and Natasha. The real question that you have is Natasha not enough? Do you really need another healer? Or perhaps you don't like Natasha's design and you just want a different kind of healer. In that case, these are some things that you want to consider. My personal opinion, I'll rate Bailu as A+ tier. A very solid character that will be able to help you make a lot more decisions and is much more versatile compared to Natasha, who does feel a little bit rigid and doesn't scale as well with time, for example, as Bailu, who scales with Eidolons. And last character now, Yanqing, another new character for CBT3, and Yanqing is a single unit DPS of the ice element. My analogy for Yanqing is like a glass car. I wanted to put glass cannon, but I wanted to suit a little bit more of the thematic of maybe machinery. You guys can kind of get where I'm coming from. Has a lot of crit buffs in this character. Gonna be really great for big PP showcases in terms of crit damage multipliers. I might do a few myself, not too sure yet, we'll see. And very strong attack and speed stat for a character, but expected of the Hun class, which generally has pretty good attack and speed stats. Attack is slightly higher than Sealy in comparison, but speed is a little bit slower. Has an inbuilt reduced aggro, which is really great for Hun class, which generally tends to be a little bit squishier, but of course is is of a common element in terms of ice, and when Herta is already so strong as a 4-star AoE unit which offers ice weakness breaking, Yanqing might not be an ideal option for most, and is actually pretty weak to AoE as well because reduced aggro doesn't get rid of AoE damage. So the two questions or two characters that Yanqing competes with definitely is the 4-star Shu Shang, who offers a physical element instead of an ice element, very fast and independent on her own as well, acts very often, not as squishy as Yanqing because doesn't require that ability to avoid damage. And the other option is Seelie, and Seelie offers a much more rarer element of Quantum and also has a bit more AoE in her nature because if she eliminates the target, she gets to go again. Seelie is very fast, but of course is much squishier because her stats, her defensive stats are much lower as well. But nonetheless, they both suffer from similar downsides of squishiness. I do feel that for this scenario, especially if you're thinking of Seelie or using Shu Shang, I might be rating this character as an A tier. These are some other tier lists I might think that you'll be interested in. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end, and if you like this video, do like and subscribe for more of such future content as well. It will really help us grow, and we will definitely be here for the launch of Honkai Star Rail. And see you in the next video.